Good afternoon. Welcome to this urgent Leader of the Council Cabinet Member meeting on Wednesday the 28th of April 2021 at 12 noon. Thank you everybody for attending. Item 1 is apologies. Stephen, any apologies please?
Chair, I've no apologies. Thank you.
Item 2 is the identification of any urgent items to which call-in will not apply.
So I understand that that's item 5, Chair, the Rough Sleepers Accommodation Programme grant application. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take any declarations of interest, please? I'll take silence to be none then. Thank you. Item 4 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of March 2021. I've read those minutes. I'm content that they're accurate. Any other comments or thoughts or inaccuracies that anybody would want to point out? Then those minutes can be agreed. So that moves us on to item 5, which is under urgent key decisions, and this is the MHCLG Rough Sleepers Accommodation Programme grant application 2122. Who's going to do this one for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. That will be me. So this item deals with a request to approve submission for the Rough Sleepers Accommodation Programme, which is a bid opportunity opened by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, opened on the 18th of March, and the closure date for applications is tomorrow, the 29th of April. It follows on from our successful bid last year for the Next Steps Accommodation Programme, where we were successful in receiving £1.65 million worth of grant to deliver 20 new units of accommodation for rough sleepers or those with a history of rough sleeping. And I'm delighted to update that all units are now in occupation. This grant opportunity allows us to go further, and we are looking to secure another 10 units within Derby to be used for this purpose. The grant opportunity allows us to seek both a capital and revenue grant, and the revenue grant is available for 3 years and dependent on the successful outcome of the capital grant. The total grant that we are wanting to bid for is 810,000, which comprises of 600,000 capital grant and 210,000 revenue grant over the 3 years. It will also require a 50% contribution from the housing revenue account. And the recommendations in terms of approvals would be to approve submission of this bid to a total of 810,000, with 600,000 being capital to be spent within this financial year, and a further 210,000, which would comprise of 70,000 up to 70,000 revenue grant, which would provide the support element to these properties and these individuals this year, and a further 140,000 over the forthcoming 2 years. Also to delegate any approval of the acceptance of any resultant grants to the Strategic Director of Communities and Place, following consultation with the Strategic Director of Corporate Resources and the Cabinet Lead for Adults, Health and Housing, subject to acceptable grant conditions. To approve the transfer of the revenue aspect of the resultant grant to Derby Homes in line with the 2021 partnership agreement, subject to a successful award, to add 1.2 million to the housing revenue account capital programme for 2021-22, with 600,000 grant funding and 600,000 as match funding from the housing revenue account. To authorise Derby Homes to identify and process all the necessary grant payments to third parties in relation to the project, which would primarily be to support providers, in line with existing agreed processes, subject to the approval of the Strategic Director of Communities and Place. To use of non-secure tenancies for the purposes of the bid for the newly acquired properties, in line with the requirements of the bid. And to delegate the acquisitions of up to 10 properties to the Strategic Director of Communities and Place in order to meet the timescales required within the project.
Thank you, Claire. You referred to the short notice we got with this. They came out on the 18th of March and submissions have to be in by tomorrow. Can you just clear off for me, please, why it is that it's needed to come to this urgent leaders meeting rather than being dealt with at Cabinet?
Certainly. We have to co-produce the bid with our Ministry of Housing lead, and clearly they are co-producing bids up and down the country, so the availability of our lead has to be taken into account. We also have to liaise across both strategic housing and development teams around capacity to be able to deliver the bid, and also line up potential support providers, because the delivery of this is very time limited. So the expectation is that the bid decisions will be made late May, and we're expected to start delivering from the beginning of June. So there's a lot for us to organise in a very short period of time to line up all of the aspects of the bid, and the bid opportunity, in fact, has only been running for just little over a month.
Okay, so this is an annual funding round, and is there some frustration that we have to do it on an annual basis? Would it?
Chair, there is immense frustration at both the opportunity contained within all of the homeless bids at the moment, but also the time pressures that come with those, and the resources needed to be able to pull these bids together at short notice whilst continuing to deliver the services to the City of Derby.
I understand the need for some delivery, some urgent timescales on this, and it's actually already proving dividends with the 20 units that you've already described. But there is that frustration, and I think we and Councillor Webb will continue to make representations in that regard. Talking to Councillor Webb, it's your portfolio. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Councillor Webb?
Just to say that this is part of our successful programmes that we've been running. So in the last 3 years, we've come down from 34 rough sleepers at the rough sleepers count, and we are now at 6. Even though we are bidding for accommodation for 10 units, don't forget that rough sleepers do come and go, and as we get them off the streets, we need to make sure that any that do come onto the streets have accommodation. We're working very well in preventing people becoming homeless and becoming on street. We are working on the principle that was established early on in the COVID pandemic of everybody in, and we are trying to keep people in as much as possible. I think the work that our teams have been doing has been absolutely magnificent, and I can only support this bid for further funding for the benefits that not only will be seen with regard to getting homeless people off the streets, but it will also be seen as a measure to keep the city centre clean.
Okay, good, excellent. So, any other thoughts, comments, questions from guests at today's meeting? No? In that case, then, I'm content with the recommendations 2.1 to 2.5 and can agree then, Claire. Good luck with the timescales on this one. Thank you very much. Okay, so that takes me back to the agenda and item 6 under the urgent contract and financial procedure matters, the 2021-22 capability fund for approval and to accept. Who's going to present this one?
This one's mine, Councillor, Nigel Bryan.
Nigel, could you just explain again the urgency for it, for I have to come to this meeting rather than a full cabinet meeting?
Yeah, so the urgency with this is around being able to continue with contractual activities. So everything that's been delivered in Capability Fund is already delivered through previous funding, which was known as the Access Fund. So we have a series of contractual commitments to continue with revenue-based services, which are around things like support for Bike Back Derby, some support for Cycle Derby, training activities, workplace grants for things like cycle stands and showers for small and medium-sized employers, small grants for travel planning for businesses, and things like personal and community travel planning. So working alongside places, other council services in education, Move More Derby, but also working with local charities, groups, and with bodies like Sustrans, national bodies like Sustrans. So we were already active in delivering all of this under the previous scheme, and previously it was awarded in different ways, but locally it was awarded as a joint scheme between us and Nottingham to deliver jointly, and we were getting good value out of that joint delivery. Access Fund we knew was coming to an end, but the announcement of the replacement for that scheme was hugely delayed from government while they were dealing with the COVID pandemic. So the announcement of how it was going to be replaced, the first notification came to us on the 3rd of March. It's a process where there's an indicative sum of money for us to apply for. So we know that we're looking at £270,000. For us, for 1 year, it's a transition year into, and there'll be another form of funding next year for the subsequent 3 years. But for this transitional year, say the announcement was 3rd of March, we've then had to seek further clarification. The really important bit, though, is that now it's been awarded to individual authorities. So some of our joint contracts, we've had to do quite a bit of work on those. And the government is keen to release the funding, hopefully by the end of this month, so that we can continue with those contractual activities. So the urgency is not to have to pause in delivery, which would create a risk to maybe the funding of some of those external groups. But where we've got employees, not necessarily directly ours, but they're working in charities, etc., they would probably have to be made redundant or stood down for a period. And then obviously we'd have to build the services back up. So it's continuity really is the urgency here.
You're on mute, Chair.
Sorry. Good. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Nigel?
No, I think that's covered most of it. Really, it's just the principle of being able to continue. The government switched the funding around in preparation for the subsequent years schemes, doing an interim transitional year, and it's just changing the form of contract and release, and everything's disrupted from the department. So that's the story really. Excellent, thank you. In that case, are there any questions or comments? It's obviously appropriate to come to this meeting. I'm content with the recommendation at 2.1, unless anybody's got any comments or questions. No? In case I can accept 2.1 on item 5, which moves us on to item 6. Get my agenda back up. Again, under urgent contract of 7 we're on to. So it's again under contract and financial procedure matters, Green Homes Grant Authority to receive funding in relation to green homes.
Yes, good morning, Leader. Ian Fulliger and I can talk to this one this morning. The report relates to the opportunity for the Council to receive additional Green Homes Grant, as you described. It's funding from BEIS, the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy arm of the government. You'll recall, Leader, in November, Cabinet authorised the submission of a bid for home energy improvement grant funding under the Green Homes Grant Local Authority Delivery Initiative. That bid was successful and the Council was awarded £900,000 to deliver in partnership with Derby Homes, home energy improvements to both properties in the private and the public sector. In March, early March this year, BEIS took ourselves and all the other local authorities by surprise by making additional provisional grant awards under the LAD 2 programme. So this is additional money, and all local authorities had expected that we were going to have to bid again for those monies. BEIS, through the Midlands Energy Hub, which is our regional energy agency, are requiring that councils confirm by the beginning of May provisional acceptance of those monies, and that's the real urgency here, Chair. We need to confirm by the beginning of May that we accept the money in principle, because BEIS want to reallocate those monies throughout the month of May, where those local authorities are saying they can't spend the money within the timescales allowed. We also then have to submit a detailed programme to the Midlands Energy Hub by the 24th of May, and neither of those deadlines fall within our normal Cabinet cycles, Chair. So the provisional award for Derby City is, as detailed in the report, it's £1.591 million. The monies are required to be spent by December. That's a real challenge for us, given the original grant award that we did bid for has to be delivered by September. But we've had considerable discussions with Derby Homes, determining what our programme could look like, and then discussions with the likely contractor as to what their capacity is to deliver the programme within the timescales, and that we're satisfied that we should, if things go well, be able to deliver the programme on time by December. The fallback position is that the grant doesn't come with onerous conditions. Monies that we don't spend by December may well be given an extension of time. They hint at that in the letter that we've received. But if we should have to hand them back, then there's no penalty either in terms of penalties or interest charges or anything like that. So the recommendations, Chair, delegating the necessary authorities to the Strategic Director, Director of Finance, in consultation with the Cabinet member, are laid out in paragraphs 2.1 to 2.3, Chair. I'm sorry, Chair, you're on mute. Yeah.
It was the phone that went off that put me on mute. Yeah, so in summary then, welcome extra funding, but with the becoming frequently usual urgency in terms of timescales placed on it by government. But we've done extremely well in the past on those timescales. Sounds like you're already in discussions with the contractors to be able to deliver on this, which will be extremely positive for those that benefit from it. Again, Councillor Wood, your portfolio, anything to add?
Councillor Wood, it's Councillor Webb. Yes, another welcome chunk of money that will help improve energy efficiency of accommodation across the city, both in the public and the private sector. We will endeavour to do our best to spend the money, or at least have it programmed by December, so that we don't have to return any of this generous offer from the government. So again, I see no issues with this one. I would recommend that we accept the recommendations 2.1 to 2.3 as laid out in the report. I'd just like to say thank you to the team for the work that they've done on this to make sure that we have the possibility of accepting this money and delivering for the city yet again.
Okay, thank you, Ian, and I'm sure you'll keep Councillor Webb rather than Councillor Wood updated in relation to the progress on this.
You had me worried for a minute.
Good luck with that, Ian, anyway. So I can, it's recommendations 2.1 to 2.3, which I'm content with to accept. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So it leaves us with one last item, again under, and that's item 8, the Moorway Stadium outsourced leisure operator. I'm guessing it might be Claire to present this.
I think I'm going to present it, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to guess wrong. Ben, come. Thank you.
So the purpose of this report is to seek approvals for the decision necessary to enable progress with securing an operator for Moorway Sports Village to continue and to include Moorway Stadium in that procurement exercise. This will allow the facilities and services to be managed and delivered to customers by one leisure operator. Therefore, coordinating delivery and management of services for customers, economies of scale, and creating a real leisure destination at the whole Moorway site. This would also help to maximise the financial return and increase opportunities for usage by the local community, as well as attract regional visitors, creating more social and economic impacts and tourism for the city. Previously, at Cabinet on the 30th February 2009, delegated approval was received for Moorway Sports Village to determine the operational model and take all necessary action to secure an operator. So now we're looking to really create that one site and add Moorway Stadium in there. So the current Moorway Stadium has a net budgeted subsidy of 124,769, but by incorporating us under one umbrella, it will provide a better financial position than if Moorway remains a standalone site. So, Chair, the recommendations we're looking for are that to note that the procurement exercise has already commenced to ensure that we hit the project deadline for spring 2022 for opening the site, with tender documents to be published on the 30th of April. To recommend Moorway Stadium is included in the current procurement exercise as a part of the mandatory bid, allowing the procurement of the operator, as I said, for the whole site. To delegate authority to the Deputy Chief Exec, Strategic Director for Communities and Place, following consultation with the Strategic Director for Corporate Resources, the Cabinet Member for Finance and Procurement, and the Cabinet Member for Leisure, Culture and Tourism to determine the operational model for Moorway Stadium, to take all necessary action to secure an operator and to enter into all necessary contractual arrangements to deliver this element of the project. And then subject to the recommendations, just to note that Moorway Sports Village will include the Moorway Stadium facilities, the 50-metre pool and water park, all under one umbrella of a leisure destination. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ben. Just a couple of points to cover off there again, as we've done with the other items. Can you clarify the need for urgency in this coming to the leaders' meeting rather than Cabinet?
Yes,
and yeah, do that first. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. It's to keep to the project timeline to ensure that the operator is in place for opening in spring 22. The risk of delaying the decision would be to risk delaying the opening date.
Okay.
So we are publishing the tender documents on the 30th of April, as I mentioned earlier.
And that's the reason why you're presenting this report to me as in an urgent leaders meeting today.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. The other slight clarification I'd like to, I've already had raised with me around what work we've already done with stakeholders in the track side and stuff, and I'm just wondering what you've already done and what the plan is in relation to working with stakeholders around this proposal.
So there's been some initial stakeholder communications go out about the process for the procurement exercise. Next week there is a meeting with the new chairman of the Derby Athletics Club, and we will continue to ensure that communications with all stakeholders continues along the process as required.
Are you confident that this dealing with it in this way will be a benefit to the stakeholders as well as the council itself?
Yes, Chair. The next stage where we go through is where the real detail relating to those that are potentially impacted by this decision, and so we'll make sure that we take the people on the relevant journey and they are engaged in the process and have a chance to input.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Your portfolio. Anything you'd like to add at this point?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. It seems common sense. it should be one village and the same person running it. Any other solution seems crazy to me. So yes, I fully support and recommend the recommendations.
Okay. Well, it looks like the chair of scrutiny, exec scrutiny, is asking for a comment first. Councillor Repton.
Yes, Chair. There has been no real scrutiny or debate about these controversial, important matters, and councillors certainly have not been involved as they should have been. These proposals are being pushed through with undue haste during PERDA and days before important local elections. And I would ask, even at this 11th hour, for a deferment of this decision making and to open it up to the correct debate and scrutiny that it actually deserves. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, you've heard from the officers the reason for the rationale for bringing it at this point, and we don't want anything to cause any unnecessary delay in this.
You can't bypass democracy, though, Chris. So, irrespective of what officers may say, there is such a thing in this country about the importance of democracy. I know that nationally your party doesn't seem to favour that much, but it's quite popular.
Councillor Shanker, did you have anything you wanted to comment, I think?
Yes, please, Chair. It's a shame common sense didn't prevail when this report came to Cabinet in February 19, as Councillor Wood said. What I'd like to know is why the sports stadium wasn't included in the procurement exercise at that stage. But before we get onto that technical detail, I think more fundamentally and democratically for Derby, Chair, can somebody explain why this is now an urgent leader's decision, having originally been planned for a cabinet member's decision tomorrow, but both of those ways forward has prevented this from going through due scrutiny of the exec scrutiny function. It's prevented it going to the full cabinet, which there was one just a matter of weeks ago. Why is this now, due to some bad planning, some oversight, become so urgent when it wasn't raised, all the way since February 2019? Why should Derby's taxpayers be paying for the price of your lack of planning to make this decision in a timely manner to allow proper public scrutiny?
Okay, so a couple of points there. I wonder whether or not, when you were considering this as project manager back in the day, whether when you were considering outsourcing the operation of this pool, whether or not you thought the sports village would be an appropriate way of dealing with things. But we've certainly developed that further now, and we're confident that that's the way.
Answer that if you want me to answer that first before you answer any of the questions.
Not particularly. In relation to the rationale for bringing it to an urgent leaders meeting, you've already heard that it's the officer's decision to bring it at this point to avoid delay in the project as a whole. It's not our idea, it's not lack of planning on our behalf. It was always being considered to what extent the sports village would be as a whole, whether it would include the track and the sports field and the pool.
It's always been considered. So why wasn't it in the February report then?
Because the decision and recommendations only just come forward from the officers, Peggy.
You just said it was always being considered.
Why it's appeared at today's meeting, perhaps Emily can clarify the situation in relation to the governance and procedures for bringing it here today.
That's fine, Chair. Thank you. Obviously, Ben can give more detail on the work that's been done in relation to the procurement of the operator. Although the original cabinet delegation was made some time ago, the work in relation to the operator procurement has really been ramping up very recently, is in line with the overall project programme. As that work has been progressed, it's become absolutely clear about the absolute logic of including the stadium within that procurement activity. Given that apologies for the noise, I am having some work done at my house, so if that's being picked up on the microphone, I apologise. the site being dealt with as a whole, given the shared utilities, the shared car park, the shared grounds. And therefore it makes absolute sense for this decision to be, which flows out of that original key decision, to be considered now and to not risk the overall procurement timetable, which I'm sure we're all keen to ensure that the project is delivered on time as planned, and that therefore it's essential that the procurement documentation is issued this month. It's correct. This decision was originally to be considered as a cabinet member decision. However, the value was, it was pointed out by Councillor Shanker that the value should be seen as cumulative, and I did review that, and that is why it was felt sensible to bring it to this urgent leader decision meeting that was scheduled for today.
Okay. Thank you. Does that clarify it for you, Councillor Shanker?
Well, just on that point particularly then, so it's now deemed and thank you for that, Emily, an urgent leaders decision and not a cabinet member decision. But the important bit there is it's still being not classed as a key decision, and that's why now we find ourselves such an important decision being taken to privatise a good portion of Derby's leisure facilities. Not being classed as a key decision means it's not being allowed the due scrutiny that I believe in a democracy it should be allowed. And that's quite critical here. Just because it shares a car park and an entrance, I just don't think that's enough justification to put a stadium and sports track into the hands of the private sector.
Okay. Noted.
That's a question for Emily then. So what further justification on why this isn't classed as a key decision? Sorry, Chair.
Councillor Shanker, I have repeated today already the exact justification I gave you by email and to your Shadow Cabinet colleagues yesterday, that there is clear provision within the Constitution, and it's a provision that has been used on previous occasions, that where a decision flows directly as a consequence of the implementation of another key decision, it is not in itself key. It is clear to both myself and to Simon Riley, the Council Section 151 officer, that this decision flows directly as a consequence of implementing the decision to appoint an operator for the Moorway Sports Village. And therefore, it is correct that it is taken not as a key decision, but as a financial matter.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, please, Chair.
Sorry, who was that?
It's Councillor Shanker again.
You want to come back in?
Please.
Okay.
I did say I had a couple of initial questions before I went into further questions, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
To be uncomfortable in answering some of these questions for some reason, Chair.
Not uncomfortable in any way, shape or form, Councillor Shanker, and I don't actually have to allow you to keep on speaking, but I'm content to, because you know that I'm all up for openness and transparency in what we in the business that we do in this country.
Let's not go into open and transparency, hey, Councillor Bolt. So I'm aware of a FGM report, Facilities Management Group, I believe, that advised officers and in secret the Cabinet, possibly the leader and just the Cabinet member responsible, about pursuing the option.
Sorry, what do you mean by in secret, Councillor Shanker?
Because it's not been made public. It's not been to scrutiny. That's the whole idea. That
it'd be a normal meeting, though, wouldn't it?
Whichever meeting it was obviously not a public meeting. That's all I know. I wasn't part of that meeting.
It would be a normal course of dealing with such things. No secrecy behind.
Could one of the senior officers involved in the service area, or maybe the Cabinet member, just talk us through the FMG report? And particular interest to me is the weighting of the various considerations before the Cabinet has decided to move towards the preferred operator model of outsourcing this. Value for money, community benefit, they're the sort of aspects that I believe were considered. Can someone just share with us the details of what proportion they were considered in?
Chair, may I just mention something? That the decision to appoint the operator for the Moorway Sports Village was taken in February 2019, and the clear delegations were made in that report about how that appointment would take place. And Rachel North has been exercising that delegation. That decision to appoint has already been taken.
Absolutely, I understand.
Delegation is being exercised.
Thank you. Yes, and there.
Sorry, can I just question? Can I just challenge that? I don't think the February report says the provider operator. It looks at a preferred operator model.
Baggy, can you let me just do what I've got to do? And I was in response to your question, I was going to ask officers: has this FMG report or meeting or whatever it was? Was that in relation to the inclusion of the athletic stadium in the procurement bid, or was that in relation to the initial decision in relation to procuring an outside operator? Do you know, Ben? Do you know, Claire, which report it is that Councillor Shank is referring to?
I'm not quite sure which one is the. I don't know if Claire would like to come in on this one.
Good afternoon, Chair. I understand that FMG provided a presentation that summarised the outcome of an options analysis, and the options analysis concluded that an outsourced leisure operator would create best value for the council. And
the presentation was around the decision to outsource the operating in the first place, not the inclusion of the athletics track.
So that links into the delegated decision that Emily Feenan referred to, which is exactly what you've just said. It was in relation to the Moorway's Sports Village £42 million build. It was the project element of it that was approved. And therefore, in then assessing the wider site, when we've looked at the sharing of car parks, utilities, the opportunities of operators, marketing, etc., it was seen that it would make sense to then include the wider site in the Moorway Sports Village. This has been a key aim and aspiration of this project for 3 to 4 years, and we've always seen this as an opportunity to create a leisure destination for the city by amassing the fantastic facilities that are on that site. Okay. This decision asks for that then to include the Moorway's Sports Stadium for the purposes of procuring the operator for the whole site.
Okay, so the presentation, Baggy, the report, whatever it is that you're referring to, was not specifically in relation to the inclusion of the athletics track in the sports village, so it's not relevant today. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up?
It naturally flows from that decision, as we've already been told.
What's your point then, Baggy?
My point, Chris, is a week before important elections, there's clearly a difference of strategy here between the two main political parties. You're deciding now.
You've already had the explanation there.
Chris, you're deciding now. Please let me finish. I'll stop after I make this point.
Forward at this point.
I'll stop after I make this point. You're privatising.
Agreed last year.
Let me just make this point, please, Chris. You're now going ahead without due scrutiny to privatise a very important part of Derby's leisure offering into a already commissioned procurement exercise, which should be reporting back in spring 21 by now, without any proper due scrutiny and going through the right processes. I just think it's not very democratic at all, and why I still can't understand why it's being rushed through when this decision could be made in another couple of weeks' time, or should have been made several weeks ago. If, as Claire says, we've known about this for how many years, why wasn't this included at an earlier stage?
Okay, I'm not prepared to risk any delay on this project. I'm not.
You've delayed it by 1.5 years, 2 years almost.
Right. So moving on. Was there anything else you want to say?
I just think you should be making this decision, Chris. Now it should be deferred until after the election.
Well, I'm content that it's made now. I'm content that there will be appropriate consultation with stakeholders or discussions with stakeholders, and it ultimately will be the benefit of all the stakeholders and the city as a whole, and to this facility. So there we go with that. Anybody else needs to comment further? Well, actually, there's only the Chair of Scrutiny and Baggy present who are able to comment. So
I have a question, Chair, if I may.
Unfortunately, you're not, under the procedures, you're not entitled to speak at this meeting.
I think you are.
Could I just check that, please?
On what basis do you think you should? I'm just concerned about that, Nadine. It would normally be, if this was a cabinet meeting, it would be an urgent leader of the meeting is a proxy for a cabinet meeting taken at times of urgency, Councillor Shanker. It would be group leaders and the chair of exec scrutiny. I'm not quite sure on what basis Councillor Peatfield qualifies to speak at this meeting.
Ward Councillor?
In that case, would you give me 1 minute to text Councillor Shanker my question and he'll ask it?
She's a ward councillor. She's got a vested interest in the area. Surely you can see that.
Take the advice of the legal officer.
I'm just looking at the administration of this meeting in line with a cabinet meeting. It would not be normal for ward councillors to speak. Councillor Shanker, you've attended a lot of cabinet meetings. You know how that plans out.
In the discretion of the chair, if the chair wants to allow Councillor Peatfield.
That is the discretion of the chair, yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. So maybe the chair wants to exercise that. Are you exercising that discretion, Chair?
Question yet?
You allow me to speak, Chair, yes?
Saggy, have you got Nadine's question yet?
I have got Nadine's question. I was just going to ask you, are you allowing Nadine to ask the question?
You ask it, then it'll be within the normal procedures, won't it?
Okay. How many staff are being affected by this, and what will happen to their roles?
I don't actually foresee circumstances whereby that's likely to be a big issue, but I'll let the officers answer that. And I assume that because it's only just been brought into this, then probably those finer points aren't known yet. But Ben,
do you not think, Chair, that those finer points are really important points?
Ben, did you want to see if you offer your thoughts on this?
So following the decision being made today, then the trooping implications can be firmed up for any staff that will be involved.
Okay.
Wow.
So the 2P arrangements have not been fully considered yet.
Councillor Shanker, could you ask my follow-up question, please?
I'll ask.
It's covered in 8.3 in the report.
Okay.
Are staff aware of these plans?
I've got another meeting to go to, so I'm decided that I'm content with the recommendations in this report.
Excuse me, Chair, I have a follow-up question.
Forward. Thank you, everybody, for attending today.
Excuse me, Chair, could I ask about pensions, please?
I'm content that with the decisions that's
Chair,
been made
I'd like
today. And no, Nadine, I'm not going to offer. I'm not going to allow you to
pensions and the decision that you've made to let the council put aside members of staff.
You close the meeting. Thank you.
You're not paying as much pension to these members of staff if they're going to be